I came here in 2005 when we relaunched the news at Channel 49. So I've been here since the end of 2005. It actually didn't come on air until February of '06, but I moved here in November of '05, and so I was there at 49, solely at 49 until 2011 when we merged with 27, and now I've been there since then. So coming up 3 years since we merged together. I really do like our climate, that we have here. Some people look at it, from other parts of the country when I've traveled around. They always have this mistaken understanding that in Kansas we, are dodging tornadoes every afternoon and we're always taking shelter, and, people move out here and they bring a helmet with them just in case, that kind of idea. But I look at it on the other side of it. You could look at the likelihood that we, would have a tornado, and certainly there's that chance, and it's something we have to be prepared for. But the likelihood is actually quite low. Statistical odds in Kansas have us getting a tornado at any one spot here, like just this building. Once every 1,000 years would a tornado hit right here, which means if you live 100 years in the same place, your odds are only up to about 10% that you would ever actually experience a tornado in your lifetime. Flip that around to the positive side of it, and it's a 90% chance you'll never have a tornado in your lifetime. So that's a pretty good odds in my favor of not really having to worry too much about it. We all know, though, that you get one chance to make the right choice on there. But the other positive side to tornado sheltering is one of the things that I've been really trying to encourage people to remember is, well, first of all, in Kansas, we're very lucky to have the high density, I guess would be the best way to put it, of basements and underground shelters. Compared to other parts of the Central Plains and the other parts of Tornado Alley in general, we have a very low injury and death toll, partially because of our low population in rural areas, but the other half of that has to do with the fact that we have a lot of underground shelters available, and there's never been one single occurrence documented in the state of Kansas that someone has died underground in a tornado. What really becomes the biggest factor in why Kansas has tornadoes is really everyone tries to say it's hot and cold air battling together, which is the worst oversimplification of weather I've heard. But really what it is around here especially is when storms come out of the west, they're low pressure systems. And it's the battleground that ends up forming between two different kinds of air, but it's not hot and cold. It's both hot, or at least warm, and it's dry and humid. That's the difference. And if you go to western Kansas, it's dry and warm. Eastern Kansas is typically dry and humid. And somewhere in the middle, those two meet. And it causes a front to form called a dry line. And that dry line becomes the battleground for where we have severe weather. And so that's one of the big locations that we really look for development of storms. Where the cold air comes into play is up overhead, which is why early and middle spring can sometimes be so rough and violent. And even into the early part of the summer, on a year like this, I think we'll see the severe weather season last a little longer because it's still cold. I mean, we're looking at a possibility of frost tonight. The air is not that warm yet. I mean, a few days here and there it is. But there's still plenty of colder air, and if it's at the surface, it's also up overhead. And so there's cold air up overhead, and that's what really triggers our thunderstorms. Warm, humid air coming underneath that colder air. That's the breeding ground for intense thunderstorms. And then if the winds are just right and they rotate, then bigger hail and tornadoes become a greater risk. I think it's also interesting, while talking about thunderstorms, you might find it, in at least of somewhat interest, to know that the majority of thunderstorms are filled with snow. So if you're inside of a thunderstorm, it would be a blizzard inside of it. That's what's going on inside the top half of a thunderstorm. Because it's so cold up there that what's happening is not the way that we see raindrops form, it's how we see snowflakes form. Which is why thunder snow really isn't that weird. It's just unusual to see the snow survive to the ground. It's not that having snow in a thunderstorm is by no means weird, which explains why hail can form because it's so cold. Those tops of thunderstorms are 40 to 60 degrees below zero. I mean, it's bitter cold up in the top of a thunderstorm, just like it would be bitter cold if you're at the top of Mount Everest, which is, by the way, halfway up a storm. You still have to go another 30,000 feet up to get to the top. And all of those little ice crystals are rubbing up against each other, and as they do that, they shed the electrons away, and you get positive and negative charges in different parts of the storm. It gets very electrified, but all that takes the ice. Have to have the ice for that to happen. Go down to the tropics or in a hurricane where they don't have much ice in their clouds, and you don't get lightning. The loaded question. All right, picture a fence, and I'm going to walk it as closely as I can. I really have a very neutral view on it. I'm never, anybody who takes political sides to things I wouldn't trust real strongly when they're politicized. I mean, because this is not a political issue, never should have been. It's a science issue. It is now. And science has been pushed way out of the picture. Hand-picked scientists are still allowed in from either side. The collective view of scientists in the meteorological community is this is far more complicated of a subject, far more complicated of a subject than anyone is leading on. Has there been some warming? Yes, but if it's been on the order of 1 degree Fahrenheit, and this is globally, not even locally, we haven't even seen it locally, but globally, 1 degree Fahrenheit over the course of about 60 to 80 years, which means instead of being 62 out there, it's 61 80 years ago. If you can tell the difference between that, I'd be impressed. It's not yet to the sensible level. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you can't sense any change that we've had so far, which means that has there been any change in our climate? Of course, climate is always changing. And finally, I saw an article that came out that I think said it very well in the New York Times this week, that talked about the melting of the Antarctic ice sheet, and they said it was bound to happen anyway. It was inevitable. What if we've sped up the process? Finally, a voice of reason. We have not created the problem. Are we enhancing or de-hancing, if that's even a word, the problems? That's really what the question is. Funding kind of stopped about 8 or 9 years ago when, and I don't even, not even as a political statement, it was just at the time, why it was said that the science research is over. It was said, and I don't even need to say who said it because it doesn't matter. I don't want it to turn into a political statement. It's just when that was said, it really pushed science out of the picture, and it really put us in a disadvantage of figuring this thing out. I think it's worth figuring out. I mean, I don't think any of us would want to ruin our own planet. But at the same time, here's another challenge. Let's switch to the other side of the fence for a second. What if we try really hard to fix this problem, and by doing so, we tamper with our own economy? The biggest polluters are second world nations, not first world nations. And if we lower ourselves to poverty, we'll pollute more because we can't afford the changes. And so we have to find this balance somewhere in the middle that puts it all into perspective. That's a loaded question.